While retirement is generally seen as a time of relaxation and self-focus, God calls us to love, serve, and help others for a lifetime. He has been preparing us for this retirement season, literally our entire lives. In retirement, countless Christians enter a state of spiritual dormancy, not knowing how they are called to have an impact for God's kingdom. The Retirement Reformation seeks to encourage and empower the 50 million Christians approaching or in retirement to embrace the calling God has been preparing in them. When the world says it's time to stop, you can begin to have your greatest impact. Welcome to iRetire4Him, the mouthpiece of the Retirement Reformation, where our goal is to journey from retirement to reformation so you can say, I retire for Him.
Reaching out to the 50 million Christ followers in America who are approaching or fast approaching retirement. We're so glad that you've joined us today here on iRetire4Him, the mouthpiece of the Retirement Reformation. I'm your host, Jim Brangenberg, along with the founder of the Retirement Reformation, Bruce Bruinsma. Check us out online, please. retirementreformation.org, retirementreformation.org, and of course on Facebook, Retirement Reformation, or you could download our app, Retirement Reformation, in the Apple Podcast Store. You know, Christians are called to ministry for a lifetime. Impacting and changing lives is more than a priority. It's God's mandate to each of us. This mandate, the call in our lives, has two parts. The common call for all believers to minister while impacting others to help and change lives. Then there is our unique call, which is based on our unique set of gifts, talents, and abilities. But how does all that play out in our retirement? Retirement is not only a reward for past service, but also a stepping stone, a launching pad for future ministry. Future fully funded ministry. Bruce Bruinsma, the founder of the Retirement Reformation, just released his latest book in the Future Funded Ministry series, and it's called A Fruitful Retirement, the result of a future funded ministry plan. Bruce joins us today for part one of a four-part series talking about how your retirement years can be a fruitful retirement. Bruce Bruinsma, welcome back to iRetire4Him.
Jim, it's good to be with you and to be able to dig into this topic for our next four sessions and to be able to find some encouragement for our listeners that those years that can be really fruitful.
Bruce, right off the bat in your book, you quote Jonathan Burton from MarketWatch when he says, "Retirement ain't all it's cracked up to be. Many pre-retirees do not fully comprehend how dramatically their lives will change. Bruce, what have you seen? Is that statement really true?
That statement is, I don't know if it can be more than true, but that statement is definitely true. And the expectation that we have that the transition from a career to that next stage is going to be one of peace, tranquility, leisure, fun, no pressure, less decisions, and so on, that it won't be complex. That could not be further than the truth. As a matter of fact, the 30 years, and we talk about retirement and as a 30-year period, I really believe is the most complex time of life. But because of other related growth opportunities that we have, it can also be the best 30 years of our life.
Absolutely. I mean, if you look at your retirement years, which you haven't really started the retirement years yet, but for the last 16 years of your quote-unquote qualified retirement years, I don't know that you could have been any busier, and God's been doing amazing things in your life. You know, Bruce, that just reminds me, as people prep for and get ready to retire, you say that many are suffering from retirement jitters. What are retirement jitters and why?
Well, we get the quote-unquote jitters when we are unsure of what is ahead, or we're unsure of what it is that we're walking into. And so you're going to go, you have an invitation to go to someone's home, you haven't met them before, you're going to meet some friends there, and you're walking up to that front door, and you're kind of the butterflies in your stomach are not organized into a flight pattern. And so the jitters, if you wish, or the butterflies, it's just an uncertainty about what's next.
Bruce, with so much doom and gloom in the news, first of all, I don't know why people even turn on the news anymore, but with so much doom and gloom in the news and the financial markets going up and down like a roller coaster at Busch Gardens, And with inflation now skyrocketing, is it possible to be at peace with our coming retirement?
It certainly is. And it's all based upon, do you understand what's true? Basic. Number two, do you have a plan on how you're going to deal with what's true? And third, do you have a relationship with Jesus and someone to talk to and be able to plug into the power of the Holy Spirit? Because one thing we know and we can be guaranteed is that in all of our lives, there's going to be change. And this transition from career or from one of the other stages in retirement to the next. If you don't have a plan, if you aren't connected to Jesus, and if you don't know what's true, then having the jitters would be the natural expectation. And so you deal with it in those ways. Does it mean it's always going to be fun? No. Does it mean it's always going to be clear? No. Does it mean that it's that there's not going to be some confusion or new and strange things that you're faced with? Of course. But isn't all of our life that way? And so for it not to be that way would be really weird and strange. And so to know what's true, and that's part of the heart of the Retirement Reformation, and part of the reason why I wrote the Fruitful book, the fourth book in that series, was to encourage people and to help them come to grips with what's true, and then to help them to make a plan, and then to be able to step into it. Now, you have to read the third book, Charting Your Course, to really lay out that plan in a meaningful way. But the being fruitful is what God calls us to be. And if I can just add one more.
Sure, go ahead.
Is that, our verse is, you did not, Jesus speaking, you did not choose me, but I chose you, and I prepared you to be fruitful and to bear fruit that will last. And so I think that's a promise we can count on.
But so many people, as you just said, you've been a financial planner, a financial advisor for decades and decades. And a lot of people have done a financial plan. Very few people have had the opportunity to do like a course like Charting Your Course and actually plan how they'll spend their time in retirement. But for those that have planned their financial future, they're all of a sudden they're going, yeah, but I didn't plan on another, a whole bunch of high inflation years in here and skyrocketing housing costs and things like that. Bruce, how will A Fruitful Retirement, your latest book, and by the way, it's a very good book. I read a ton of books for all the shows that we do, and I absolutely loved it. How will reading A Fruitful Retirement help me get there to that place of peace and purposefulness in my retirement years?
Well, first of all, it will help you deal with what is true. And everything starts with that. Number one, what is true? Secondly, what is your goal? And when we have a goal of, if our understanding of what is true, and the goal that we have is carrying out God's plan for my life in this stage, then as I go through that process of understanding what it is and carrying it out, each day when I approach that day, I'm going to be in peace about it, regardless of the conflict or the changes that come around. Hey, we've got inflation going crazy right now. I paid $4.89 for gas yesterday and filled up my tank. I mean, it's just a bummer. You take a look at a cost of electricity, cost of just about everything. So what is true is that we're going to be faced with a series of inflationary activities that are going to reduce the buying power of the money that we have. That's true. Once we understand that's true, then we can take a look and we can say, all right, how do we need to adjust as a result of that? I have a very good friend that just decided they were going to sell their house, go to their smaller home, spend the summer there, and at the end of the summer, they'd look up and say, okay, what's next in our step? That's a step that they decided to take. And there can be, everything from reducing the number of times that you take your clothes to the laundry. Most people are totally surprised how much they spend doing that. Matter of fact, I just calculated the other day. Doggone, I'm spending about $250 a month taking clothes to the cleaners. Well, I know that I can impact that by changing some of my behavior.
You could do your own laundry. All right, we got to.
Well, yes, I guess
You could learn how to iron even and start your own shirts. We're talking today with Bruce Bruinsma about his latest book of Fruitful Retirement. We're going to take a break. Check us out online, retirementreformation.org, retirementreformation.org. Stay tuned in our second segment. Time with Cynthia Ruchti, who wrote a book, Spouse in the House, about what happened when her husband retired and was home all day long. We'll be right back.
Hey, listeners, we would love for you to get a copy of Bruce's latest book, A Fruitful Retirement. Head out to retirementreformation.org/books. You will find all of the books in the Future Funded Ministry series there, including A Fruitful Retirement. retirementreformation.org/books. That's retirementreformation.org/books.
Hey, welcome back to iRetire4Him, the mouthpiece for the Retirement Reformation. As we do in every second segment of our show, we bring on somebody special to share a little bit of their story. And Bruce, it's my turn. I get to bring on the guest today, so you get to sit back and relax. Today we're talking with Cynthia Ruchti. Cynthia, how many books have you written?
I think it's 35, 36 now, something like that.
And I've only read about half of those books, but one of the books that you've just recently released is Spouse in the House. And it's not a novel. I've read so many of your novels. This one is all about, well, I'm going to let you tell people. You and your friend Becky Melby released this book together. You wrote it together because both of you are struggling with this new syndrome with your husband being home all the time. This is more of like a documentary of how you're dealing with it. What's the book all about? Tell us about it.
I love that you called it a documentary. It's like, it's not a day in the life. It's like a life in the life. And there's this period of time for a lot of us, which is when we come to the retirement age. But then the last couple of years, it's happened to a wide segment of society where we find ourselves in tight spaces all together, all the time, 24/7. It was originally spurred from the idea that not only were Becky and I dealing with that ourselves, but every time we would mention to or overhear someone say, he's home all the time, we would get this sea of nodding heads of women who understood. These are people they love. We love our husbands. That's a given from the beginning. And this isn't a book for marriages that are falling apart. That's another whole book. This is for marriages that are good, but all of a sudden there's this tension because he's home all the time. So the subtitle of the book, Spouse in the House, is Rearranging Our Attitudes to Make Room for One Another.
Yeah. All right. So you're still working. You're still writing. And honestly, people need to check you out on your online. Do you have your own website, CynthiaRuchti.com? Is that what you've got?
I do.
Okay. CynthiaRuchti.com, RUCHTI, CynthiaRuchti.com. You're still working, but Wonder Hubby got laid off and it turned into retirement. That made you a member of the HHATT Club. What's that stand for and what's the struggle here?
So he's home all the time is the HAT Club or the HHATT, but we've switched that a little now, especially as Becky and I were writing the story. WHATT, which is kind of what now? What do we do now that this is the reality in our lives? Because it's really we're home all the time. For me, I work from home. So even though I'm working and put in plenty of hours on what it is I do and love, now my husband is home all the time. He does technically work a couple of days a week, but they have a lot of Monday holidays and he only works Mondays and Thursdays. So funny how many holidays fall on a Monday that he's home anyway those days. But the crisis comes, if you want to call it that. A lot of people realize that when you're expecting retirement to be this glorious, blissful, we have all the time in the world now for one another. It's going to be just like when we were newlyweds. We often hear, how do we prepare financially for retirement? We don't often hear, how do we prepare our relationship for what's going to change, even in our houses in retirement? We're bumping into each other. We're taking the last sandwich for our own lunch, and it was supposed to be for supper, going to be part of the supper meal, almost like having a bad college roommate sometime. How do we navigate all that with a sense of humor, biblically, and then also in a way that is going to proactively make our relationships stronger instead of creating distance within that space of being home all the time.
Now, the beauty of this is 20 years from now, we're going to be able to change this book and have an addition to she's home all the time, because there are a lot of guys working from home today, and we're going to be able to flip this on. Because honestly, I'm a guy, and I thought you were a little tough on Wonder Hubby. I thought it was a little tough. I just thought you were a little tough on him.
Then the book worked.
Yeah, that's good.
I'm kidding.
I'm like, Martha, she just, what's the deal? Okay. Is the solution that Bill just needed purpose in his life? Is that what was causing so much of the friction? So has it helped that he gets out? I mean, tell us, this being home all the time, what was driving you the most crazy?
Okay, so our theory is that it happens all through marriage, but it's especially heightened in years of retirement. Few wives and husbands have exactly the same personality.
Sure.
If they do, it makes for not much of an interesting relationship. And so almost everybody who retires, there are differences in personality. One wants quiet. One likes to have noise and activity around. One wants the grandchildren over every minute of every day. The other one enjoys them periodically. The one wants to be able to not have an agenda for their day. Bill is one of those people. I will ask him at breakfast, so what's on the docket for you today? And I stopped asking the question because he never had an answer for me, because he wanted to not have an assigned day. He wanted his retirement to be where he could decide as he goes along. And I'm a different kind of personality. I thought yesterday about what was so exciting about today. And so we had to realize that what was different, where the tension was coming, was because we're different human beings. When God made us one flesh, he still gave us our own fingernails, our own hair, follicles, some of us. Yes.
Wow.
And I know. Wow. I see how I worked that in. I didn't even plan that.
Yes, you did. You're such a cheesehead. I'm throwing that right in right there. That was just a mean anti-Minnesotan comment right there. I just could feel it.
There you go. But the joy of it is that there is a natural opportunity for tension, and there's a supernatural or godly opportunity for easing that tension.
Okay, it's been a couple years, though, since Bill got laid off and he's retired. Are things better? Have you guys found a rhythm?
Yeah. They were never awful, and that was the good thing.
Boy, when I read this, I'm thinking, you were getting really sick and tired of him being in the house.
The joy of all of this is that there were some of those things that we just had to reintroduce the humor into the way we were looking at what was happening to us. One real key element was that we felt that emotionally we were tripping over each other. And oftentimes if a couple is dancing, for instance, and they're stepping on each other's toes all the time, that does not make for anything pretty. And it's going to be an unpleasant experience. So that can happen relationally and emotionally in a house too. In our house, we had a very narrow walkway that we had lived with for decades in our home. There was a chimney in the middle of the house. The main walkway was 18 inches wide. One day, rather than our colliding like we usually did, my husband, who was used to saying, "Excuse me," added a little endearment and said, "Excuse me, my love." And that turned that pinch point into something that was precious to us as opposed to being...
We just got a little R-rated right here and iRetire4Him. Thank you, Cynthia, for that.
Excuse me, my love.
I love
that's
that.
Too much for you, is it, Jim? I
want you to speak. I want you to speak to the husbands who are finding themselves at home for the very first time on how they can take your book, Spouse in the House, take this as a learning tool after they go get a copy, but speak to them. Just speak a word of encouragement to them, just a short word.
It's not going to be automatic. If you expect that coming into retirement is going to, all the little awkwardness is going to iron itself out automatically, magically, that's not going to happen. We need to talk to one another. We need to realize that there are probably going to be pinch points. How are we going to deal with them? whether that's financially or what's our date night going to look like now, or when would you like to eat breakfast now that you have an option? All of those things are going to have to be keeping that communication going. And then assuming for both men and women that your partner isn't wrong, just different in the ways they want to maybe experience what the retirement years are like.
So then flip that on its head and speak to the ladies out there who are going through this HHATT, the Hat Club. They're just new members into the Hat Club. They haven't had a chance to read Spouse in the House yet. Speak to those ladies.
One of the things that made such a difference for me was coming to realize, and I don't know how many years ago it was, but I had to come to realize that my husband wasn't just my husband and life mate, but he was my brother in Christ. So everything in God's word that applies to relationships regarding kindness and courtesy and thinking the best of one another, all those things that God had put in his word already applied to the marriage relationship. And for women, the encouragement would be, you think God hasn't said anything about this subject? Oh, yes, he has. And so going back to that source that we always go to, going back to his word, is the place where we're going to find the tools we need, in addition to this book, in order to help navigate those waters and have it be the best it can be and really fulfilling years.
Spouse in the House is something everybody needs in their arsenal of books of looking at life as life changes as we enter our retirement years. Cynthia, Ruchti, where's the best place for people to get a copy of your latest book, Spouse in the House?
Wherever books are sold, or they can also go to my website if they can't remember the exact lineup of letters for the last name Ruchti, which is impossible, Cynthia Ruchti. They can also get to that same website through hemmedinhope.com. My tagline for this and marriage and everything in life is, I can't unravel, I'm hemmed in hope.
And we'll have a link to Cynthia's website right here in the show notes attached to the podcast. Spouse in the House, get a copy. Cynthia Ruchti, thank you so much for being on iRetire4Him today.
Thank you so much, Bruce and Jim.
We'll be right back with more on iRetire4Him.
Hey, listeners, we would love for you to get a copy of Bruce's latest book, A Fruitful Retirement. Head out to retirementreformation.org/books. You will find all of the books in the Future Funded Ministry series there, including A Fruitful Retirement. retirementreformation.org/books. That's retirementreformation.org/books.
Hey, welcome back to iRetire4Him. I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Cynthia Ruchti about her book, Spouse in the House. Bruce, we're talking about your latest book, A Fruitful Retirement. You know, you open up chapter 2 saying that people can be fully alive in the 60s. They're in their 60s, in their 70s, in their 80s, and even their 90s today. Where just a century ago, the life expectancy was a mere 58 years old. How does this longevity revolution impact our ability to have a fruitful retirement?
You know, if you just kind of think back of anything that you didn't know how to do, and then you met a friend and they knew how to do it and they kind of mentored you, and over a period of time, you became as skilled as they were in what it is that you were doing. You learned it. And so the benefit, one of the benefits of longevity is that we have a time where we can learn how to live in these senior years. We can learn by the books. You can buy the books I've written and others. You can learn by listening to our podcast and experiencing that. You can observe what others do. And so the longevity gives us an opportunity to learn and then to be able to apply those lessons in our lives. And if we learn and apply them and listen to what God is saying to us, in fact, we can have a joyful period that is evidenced by the freedom that we have and what it is that we've learned in those prior years.
You know, it's funny, Bruce, is a lot of how we learn about life is from our parents. But most of us didn't have parents that lived to be, well, I did. I'm a little bit younger, but my parents didn't have parents that lived to be 60, 70, 80, 90 years old. And their parents didn't. So it's not like the people that are retired today have a lot of people they can look to for what does it look like to live to be 70, 80, 90, or even 100. I mean, there's a huge growing wave of people over 100 years old. Betty White, she lived to be 99 and 10 months or something like that. Come on. I mean, imagine what she saw. So
that's the reason why there is the need for the Retirement Reformation and these dialogues that we are having together, and to be able to learn from each other, because we don't have a lot of models, because there isn't a lot of experience. And when there isn't, then it makes those who have the experience and are able and willing to share it that much more valuable to be able to, as we talked about in the prior segment, to be able to understand what's coming and what's true.
Okay, so how does knowing that we're going to live long lives in decades in our retirement, how does that impact our ability to make a difference and to live with purpose during our fully funded ministry years of retirement? I think you say it best when you ask, what are you going to do with all those years?
That is the question. In the first division in answering that question comes from, are you going to continue to buy into what culture says retirement is, or are you going to buy into, as best we can interpret, what God intends for us, and to be able to have an opportunity to really find meaning and purpose? The difference between what culture says and what the Bible says and what Retirement Reformation is messaging is, in fact, the difference between meaning and purpose and leisure. And that's where the first decision gets made. Am I going to be dedicated to leisure? Am I going to be dedicated to meaning and purpose and have some leisure in the midst of it? That's not unimportant. It's like taking a vacation. Is that important? Yeah, you bet it is. But finding meaning and purpose, which will bring you joy and freedom in all those different stages, that's that first decision about what are you going to follow is really critical.
What I love best in your book is you did a great job just finding lots of examples of people. And you covered Randall Cunningham, a football player, and you say Randall Cunningham is struggling and suffering from a disease we call unretirement. Actually, I added that word. You didn't call it a disease, but you called it unretirement, that he's had several bouts of unretirement, which is why I said it's like a disease. Explain this to me, this bouts of unretirement.
Well, we have a classic example, staying with the football area, of Tom Brady, who went through this whole big deal about retiring a few months ago, and now he is unretiring.
Really? I haven't heard that yet. I mean, he was retiring from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Did he go back?
Yeah.
I hadn't heard that.
Yeah.
Wow, breaking news right here on iRetire4Him.
Right. So, one of the things that happens when we learn something is that when we learn it or discover it, then, and we are taking steps that will be out of pattern with that understanding, sometimes we got to back up and rechange and go again. And there's nothing wrong with that. I've got a couple of friends who, in their retirement, bought into the message that they wanted to find some meaning and purpose, took some steps into some different areas, and found they weren't the right ones. So they went back to the couch for a little while and they said, well, I think I better give it another go. And so they started down another direction. Something happened and that didn't work out. So they went back to the couch again. Said, I think I better give it another go. So perseverance is one of those keys that's important. So they then the third attempt. And in that third attempt, man, they found a thing that they're passionate about. And that, when their feet hit the floor in the morning, when the alarm clock goes off or they wake up, that's what they're thinking about and they're ready to go. And so, but it takes some exploration, and it takes perhaps some things that you're going to try and then back off from, or things you're going to try and I call it failure if you wish, but it's not working out. That's okay.
My mom was a teacher in her late 50s after she retired. She went back and got a master's degree in Christian counseling and did Christian counseling for another 25 years and loved it. There's so many opportunities out there. I mean, it's just really important that we just tell everybody, life is not over when you retire. The horizons are unlimited where you can go, what you can do. So when people struggle with these bouts of unretirement, who do you think's living a more fruitful retirement? Randall Cunningham or someone sitting at home watching movies, drinking iced tea, and playing pickleball?
Clearly Randall Cunningham, because he persevered.
Right.
He said, I know that there is, this calling. Now, it is even possible that just like in a career, you don't stay necessarily with the same company for 30 years. You may, but you may change jobs every 3, 4, 5 years. Well, why is it going to be any different in circumstances? Maybe some difference, but why isn't that the same kind of an idea that during retirement, sometimes I'm going to find something I'm passionate about and I'm going to do it to the very end. Sometimes it's going to be for a period, and then there's going to be another option. Give yourself the freedom to change, to make choices, to experiment.
Great advice. Bruce, where can people get a copy of your latest book of Fruitful Retirement?
Well, you can go to Amazon.com and pick it up from Amazon. That's easy. Or you can go to our website. And the website is retirementreformation.org. So there's a couple of places that you can get it. And hopefully it will be helpful to you. As I say in the book, you might want to read the first 3 first, but if you start only with one, this is a good one to start with.
I would agree. They're all fantastic. And just a great layup for retirement, prepping for retirement, or being in retirement, or resetting in retirement, or unretiring in retirement. Bruce Bruinsma, thanks for being today with us on iRetire4Him and for introducing your latest book of Fruitful Retirement.
Well, I'm glad that we can be fruitful together.
Yeah. You've been listening to iRetire4Him, the mouthpiece of the Retirement Reformation, with your host, Jim Brangenberg, and Retirement Reformation's founder, Bruce Bruinsma. We're Christ followers journeying from retirement to reformation, so we can ultimately say, I retire for Him.
I retire for Him.
Thanks for listening to I Retire for Him with your hosts Jim and Martha Brangenberg and Retirement Reformation founder Bruce Bruinsma. I Retire for Him is the mouthpiece of the Retirement Reformation. Most Christians tend to follow the world's pattern of rest and self-pampering during retirement. However, in your retirement, you can be focused on God's unique call to love, serve, and help others. This can be your best season of life if you take advantage of a life's worth of knowledge and experience and combine it with a greater freedom of time and money and invest it all in the generations both preceding and following you. The Retirement Reformation is encouraging Christians to find and follow God's call in all seasons and aspects of life, especially in retirement. Take time to sign the manifesto at retirementreformation.org and explore the wealth of resources available on our site. Join this movement of God and journey from retirement to reformation so you can say, I retire for Him. Go to retirementreformation.org.